This lesson, we're going to look at how we can select multiple elements, and there's various ways, just as we saw when we select individual elements, there's various methods that are available within JavaScript in order to do that. So there's get elements by class, tag name, there's query selector all, and also how you can iterate the element list, looping through each one of the items contained within the list. So the element method, query selector all, gives us the ability to select a node list representing a list of elements matching the specific group of selectors, which are descendants of the element on which the method is called. So this is, again, one of my favorite ones to use, just as query selector all is the one that returns back all of the matching elements. There's an example of how to use it. So the syntax is relatively the same, although we're adding in all after query selector, and that's going to return back a list of all the available elements on the page. So this is going to be returning back a node list, and you can see that query selector selects the one, and query selector all selects all of them. And this works similar to an array where we've got a length that's of all of the items that are contained within that node list. So query selector all will return back something that looks like an array, and we can use length in order to determine how many items are available in there and then loop through them and iterate through all of them. So of course, this lesson also has a challenge, and the objective of this challenge is to try the different methods, try out query selector, as well as selecting elements by class name, selecting elements by tag name, and then using a for loop or a for each loop through and output all of the items, the elements on the page. I'll give you a quick sneak peek of the code that we're going to be working with. So you can pause the video at this point and try it out for yourself within the editor, and I'll show you the solution. I'll walk you through the solution coming up. First, create a list of elements, so we can call it list. And using that same format where we've got document, we're going to select elements. And as you can see, brackets is giving me a few different options here. So we can select elements by class name, by tag name. So class name is used quite often as well. And we can select the elements via the class name. So let's go back into our HTML, and we can see that we've got various elements with the class of first. So how about we select all of the elements with a class of first. And when I refresh this, and if I look at what's contained within the element list, we've got what's known as an HTML collection. So this gives us all the elements that match their criteria, and we also have a length to this particular object. So if we wanted to, we could type element list and we can return back the length. Now we know that when we have a length, then that means that we can really easily iterate through all of the elements that are available. There's also another one that we can select it by the elements by tag. So let's just use list again, and overwriting that original object that we selected. And this time we're going to use by tag name. So selecting all of the elements with a span tag, and we'll console log out element list. Save us a little bit of time from writing it. You can see that we've got an HTML collection, and once again, we get all the elements with the span. When we hover over them in the console, you're going to see they light up at the top there in the browser. And then you can open it up and you can see all of the properties of that particular object that we selected. And again, ton of information there that's available to us in JavaScript. Then, of course, my favorite way to select elements, to select multiple elements, is query selector all. And this is the one that I quite honestly use the most. And this also uses the CSS style syntax. So we can select out the spans. In this case, we're returning back a node list. So this is different than the HTML collection. Similar, we also return back the length, but it is defined as a node list. So we can loop through them just as before, so creating a simple for loop. And the for loop is the one that's always going to work for the different types of lists, whereas the for each will only work for the node list, because we know that just like an array, the node list is going to start with 0 index value, and looping through while list is less than list length, and then incrementing I, so that we have a way out of our loop. So this is one way to get all of the element contents. So we can simplify it and get the list, and using the index value, we can return back the value. So console log out L. So you can see it's going to list through and it's going to log out all the different elements on separate lines. You can also update those elements. So while you're iterating through and you've got that element selected as an object, you can update its text content. And there's going to be a little bit more on that coming up in the upcoming lesson. So we can easily update these values. So how about we do an I plus 1, use rounded brackets to separate out the value. And then we'll just type in updated. And now we can see that it actually updates all those elements. So we got 1 updated, 2 updated, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And if we didn't do the plus 1, this is 0 based. So we're starting at I0. So it would have started with 0. There's also another way to loop through this node list. So you can get the element list. And using JavaScript for each method, looping through, you can get the function and as well as element. And you can return back the index value of that element as well. So if we console log out the index, and as we loop through, you're going to see that we get all of those indexes being returned back. So that's this one here where we've got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And with the index, we can access the elements within the node list just as we would with an array. So there's an option there as well. And if we want to update the element text content, because now we've got it within the L object, we can update the text content just as we did up here. But this is a little bit cleaner way to do this. And how about we use a template literal in order to do this? So the rounded curly brackets in order to indicate the index value, and then we'll type updated there. So that will update that content that's contained into each one of those elements. And as you can see, when you go into the element list within the elements tab, you can see all of these elements are updated. So we've got all of these spans that have been updated with the new values. And the nice thing about it is that you can really easily change your selectors. So for instance, if we comment this one out, and this one's going to do the spans as well. And you can see we're actually throwing an error because we're not able to use the for each with the HTML list. So that's something to keep in mind. So when you are using the get elements by tag name or get elements by class name, keep in mind you can't use the for each. The for each is only for the node list. So even though they do look the same, there are subtle differences. So let's go back into here and let's select the elements with the class of first, and we'll make the updates to those. So you can see that we found one there, one there, one there, one there, one there. And you can do a whole bunch of stuff. So even as we saw in the last lesson where we can update the element style and background color. So we can set all of the background colors to red if we want. I'll just use single quotes. So all of them get updated to red. And it makes it really easy to select those elements and manipulate them. So go ahead and try this out. And coming up, I'm going to show you a little bit more on element manipulation. And this is really cool because it gives you so many nice ways to really easily update the visible content within the page.